What we're going to hear this afternoon is a continuation of what our parish priest, Father Uja, started, talking about the Ignatian Contemplation. I'll just do an overview to remind us of where Father Uja was talking from. What I want to dwell on proper today is actually called praying with the five senses, which is actually a contemplative prayer, the Ignatian contemplative prayer, that we also refer to as prayer of imagination or imaginative prayer. But I just want to refresh our memory so that we can be in tune with where I will be centering my talk on today. First, just to remind us that contemplative prayer is encountering God through our imagination, using our imagination, the way we think, the way we reason, finding God and finding God in that reasoning, in our thinking. And just to say that contemplative prayer, when you hear other names, we are still talking about one and the same thing, you hear things like the Ignatian Contemplation, imaginative prayer, imaginative contemplation, or gospel contemplation, or simply imaginative prayer. So when we're talking about all this, it's still one and the same contemplative prayer by St. Ignatius. What will it be like? Just going to pose this question to us. Maybe use a second or two to think about it. What will it be like to encounter Jesus face to face? What will it be like to encounter Jesus, not in the Blessed Sacrament, physically, not in the Blessed Sacrament. 2, to witness the moment of his birth. What will it be like when Jesus was born? You just imagine yourself, you were there. To hear his voice as he calls Peter, just like he called the other apostles. You were present when he called Peter. What would it feel like? Or, more still, to feel the joy of Mary Magdalene at Jesus' resurrection. What will it feel like for you? Like I said earlier, Father Uja introduced and explained that the Ignatian contemplation is a method of prayer that involves using our imagination to bring Scripture to life. The Ignatian contemplation allows us to see stories that we may have heard countless number of times with a new eye, with new sense of imagination. Just also recall that the contemplative prayer or prayer of imagination is better when you use the narrative passages in the scriptures, especially like the gospel, the 4 gospels. They are more alive when you use these narrative scripture passages. The imaginative prayer offers us the opportunity to notice how Jesus treats those that he ministers to, how he interacts with his family and friends, and ultimately how he speaks with you. That's one of the power of the imaginative prayer. You find yourself having an encounter, physical encounter in your imagination with Jesus. So like I said, I am going to dwell more on the Ignatian imaginative prayer using the 5 senses. However, I'm going to reiterate the steps that St. Ignatius gives to enter into this prayer. There are certain elements that you need for you to put yourself into the position where you can begin to apply, put into use the five senses, your five senses. First, preparation for prayer. It is important that you spend time ahead of time. What do? When you to look for that passage you're going to pray with, as well as what you should focus on. Like I said earlier, the gospel passages, they are excellent references to use. 2, entering into the prayer. You should pray for guardians. Pray that all of your thoughts and actions are directed by God. This can be a little bit difficult, but one of the ways I'm able to do this is to use a mantra. And what is mantra here? In other spheres, they'll call it prayer of ejaculation, ejaculatory prayers. The one you say repeatedly. For me, if I'm able to put myself in that situation when I use this mantra, it could be something that will be useful to you, or you can also generate your own. But we are used to, for example, I when I'm trying to quiet myself down to do this form of prayer, what I use a mantra is, Jesus, I trust in you. Jesus, I trust in you. It gets to a point. It becomes, how do you do that? What you do, you begin to pray with your breath. You begin to take it with breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Before you know what happens, you are no longer speaking it, but you are now, your breath, your breathing in and breathing out takes it over. But you start, Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I love you. It's coming from your lips, but in no distant time, it has been taken over by your breathing mechanism. You're breathing out and you're breathing in. So that mantra is helpful for me to quieten me down in order for me to be absorbed in the presence of Christ, of Jesus, in order to enter the prayer of imagination. 3, review the narrative. Like I said, the Gospels are excellent for this form of prayer. Reviewing it means you should read it at least once, but preferably twice. Go over the passage twice. What does that help you to do? It helps you to put in your mind the story, the events of the story. And when that has been captured in your mind, you move to the next thing, composition of place. Take some time to set the stage and picture the environment in which the story takes place. 4, ask for the grace you hope to receive. What do you hope to gain from this time of prayer? So your prayer intention comes up here. Then 5thly, there are 5 steps. Contemplation or imagination. Pray through the story you have already set the stage for. So let the narrative begin to play out. Imagine the people, imagine their words, their action, etc., etc. So when you have been able to come to this level, you are ready now to use your 5 senses, your senses. And that's your senses of hearing, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, your sense of touch. These 5 senses become very useful when you have set the stage for your imaginative prayer. Now, for me, I'm going to illustrate each of these senses when I use the scripture passage from Luke chapter 5, 1 to 11. The story on Luke chapter 5, 1 to 11. One of those very fantastic stories about Jesus' encounter when Jesus called the apostles, when he called Peter specifically in the presence of his brother, Andrew and I don't know the apostles again. Who be Andrew, brother? Peter. thank you very much. Peter had an encounter with Jesus in the presence of Andrew and James. You find that in Luke 5, 1 to 11. Very fantastic story. So I used that story. I went through it, prayed with it, and I'm going to be illustrating each of these senses and my encounter using these senses with this scripture passage. First, what happens with your sense of sight? Your sense of sight. What you do with your eyes? What do you see? Look at the colors. You should appreciate a whole lot of things with your eyes in the environment that you have set yourself in. The colors, the landscape, the terrain. What's the compound like? What's the environment like? The clothes of the people that you encounter. What kind of clothes? What are the colors that they put on? What kind of clothes? Was it jeans and shirt? Was it a robe? When I prayed with this passage, my sense of sight caught many things. And face to face with Jesus. You remember the story? When Jesus came to the lakeside of Nazareth, he was there. And of course, when he got to the riverside, two things caught my sight here. I could see Jesus, not just getting into the boat. He had an encounter with Peter, and he gave Peter one very beautiful smile, reassuring smile. I'm not here to do you harm. He gave him a very warm smile. I could visualize that picture of Jesus smiling and reassuring Peter. I'm not here to harm you. I'm rather here to bring you away from that difficulty. And he encouraged him, push your boat, not just one step further, 2, 3 steps further, push it further. So I could see that connection with the power of my sight, seeing Jesus encouraging Peter. And that encouraged Peter. And we know the story. They were all night, they caught nothing. And here Jesus came, not in a rude manner, but to help the situation. And what did he do? Reassured him with his smile. And that encouraged Peter to do what? Push the boat 2 steps further. So I could picture that. And I could see Jesus, the color, what he was putting on was not a jeans trouser like I'm putting on. Of course, I visualized Jesus putting on a flowing robe, with a sash round the waist. And of course, I could see his hair flowing down because he's a Jew. The average Jew will have long hair, isn't it? I didn't visualize Jesus like this. So I had that was the power of my sight. And what else did I see using my sight? At that point, I could stand from a distance and begin to look at Jesus and wish that he would talk to me. That we'll see later in the colloquy. Now, the second sense that I employed was the sense of hearing. For you to listen to the winds, the footsteps, the crowds talking, or the gentle voice of Jesus. I could visualize, I could hear people talking among themselves, rushing to see, who is this man? And we've heard so much about him. I was just at one part of the crowd and watching everybody move past me. And when they were gone, I had to walk with them. I moved with them, follow them behind, but I don't even know this man called Jesus. And I was there in that environment as a fish. Somebody who came to buy fish, a fish trader. Peter was my fish merchant. He sells fish for me. And this time around, people rushing towards the lakeside. What are these people pursuing or going after? I could see the crowd before they got to the lakeside. I can begin to notice people talking. Then Jesus got to the boat side and with his gentle voice asked that the boat, asked that they should push the boat 2 steps away from the shore. So I could hear that gentle voice of Jesus, saying that. Then I could, the footsteps of people were rushing. I could actually experience the movement. The movement was massive to the extent that when I kept my ears to the ground, I could hear the stamping of feet. That was how big the crowd was. The power of imagination to hear. Then the other one was the smell. The third one is smell. Notice the scent of the dust on the road, fresh sea air. In other stories, I also like cooking food. I remember when Jesus encountered the apostles, and he asked them, what is on, they put fish on the fire. And I could smell the fish. And that took me to the riverside like, oh, the smell of fresh fish. Not the natural fish that comes from the river. And I could just smell that aroma that came from it. See the smoke going up and the aroma that goes with it. That was very nice to have that smell. Then you see the dust, the scent of the dust, the sense of the crowd moving, and you see the dust welling up, and I could smell the dust. It was a dry, windy road leading to the seaside or the riverside. Then, what next did I experience? This time with my sense of taste. In your sense of taste, you should imagine local flavors. If there is a meal or taste of dry dust and fresh water, I could, in that midst, when Peter, was struggling with the net to pull, something came. The water welled up. I was standing by the side, and the water fell. Part of the splash of the water got into my lips, and I tasted salt water. And then I realized that the fish that comes from our river tastes differently from the fish that you find in our ponds these days. And that tasted so nice. And I could say, oh, it made me feel so great, because it made me also realize that I am by the riverside and begin to imagine the life of the folks who live their daily life around the river, their economy, their life, their everyday life is centered around that. So I was able to taste what they experience every day. For them, it's normal. But for me, it gave me a sense of reflecting. Oh, there is something called salt water. Yes, the river has salt. So I could taste that. So it was something that got me excited. Then goes for the fifth sense, which is the sense of touch. Feel the physical environment, like the hot sun, a cool breeze, a soft ground under your feet. As I journeyed with the crowd, not knowing where they were going, until we got to the riverside, I also noticed there were many who were on their bare feet. And I had to also feel their pulse. I removed my sandals. Sandals I wanted to enjoy what maybe they don't enjoy it because it has become an everyday life for them. But I want to experience it. I begin to realize that part of the river can be very, very swampy. It can be very clayish. So I could feel the clay around the riverside. I can feel it because I stepped on it. Using my power of imagination to realize that, oh, this is how this really is. So my feet actually touched the soil. So it's not like just looking at it, but I could touch it because my foot touched it. So that's the power of touch. Getting connected with the physical environment that you find yourself. You should be able. And of course, the riverside. I could feel the cool breeze that comes from the river. Unadulterated air. Fresh, cool breeze. And that was refreshing on my skin. I never wanted to leave that environment. But something happened. When Peter, who is actually my physical, my purpose of coming, because I come to buy fish from Peter every now and then. But today was a different day. Because there were a whole lot of crowds, and that was a bit confusing for me at first, until I realized that something great is happening. When Jesus asked Peter to do what he should do, then came fish beyond number. And this particular fish, using my power of sight, I didn't just see fish, I saw very big fish, different from the fish that I usually would buy from Peter before now. So that caught my sight too. And what happened? That takes us to moving away, having explored with our five senses. It takes us to what happens next. We have sharing. At this point, I wanted to now have a colloquy. What is a colloquy? Having a discussion, having a heart-to-heart conversation with the character. The principal character here in this story is Jesus. And what happened? I wanted to tell him how I felt. I wanted to tell him what I saw. I wanted to tell him how surprised I was, or I am, from what I saw. It was more a miracle. This size of fishes I've never seen up to today. So I wanted to have that conversation with him. And following that conversation, I wanted to also, is it possible I could be part of this experience? Because maybe I shouldn't be buying fish anymore. I should be catching fish. You should be around to make it happen for me so I can be catching this size of fishes. So I was having that kind of conversation with him. And Jesus looked at me. You know what he told me? Do you want to know? I didn't come to catch fish. I want to turn men to catching men and not catching fish. And I scratched my head. I asked him, is it possible I could catch men? At that point, Peter left that huge number of fish. And I looked at the huge boat of fish, and I looked at Jesus. I was able to summon up courage. I followed foolishly. Peter, of course, didn't follow foolishly, because Christ said, follow me. He didn't tell me, follow me, but I was following them. I was following behind. And at the end, I started catching men and not fishes. And what eventually will I do after that? I am going to listen. I'm going to take a pause. Quiet. Listen to what Christ responded to those my inquiry. So it's important that I do that. And having gotten those responses from Christ, it was evident that I was not catching fish. I was not going to be selling fish. Because mine was selling, buying and selling. Don't forget, Peter was my fish merchant. I moved from buying fish from the merchant, but this time, I wasn't going to buy humans, but I was going to fish for men. And lastly, I had to thank God for this experience. And I said the Lord's Prayer. I hope this experience was worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Let's start for Oscar.
Glory to Jesus.
Glory to Mary and Joseph.
I think that was quite a journey. Thank you for that explicit story about imaginative or contemplative prayer. I was expecting that as a teacher, you told people about narrative scripture, and if we ask many of us here, it's going to be difficult for us to talk about the difference between narrative scripture as a weapon for contemplative prayer. You would have done more explanation on narratives. What are narratives? So that they will understand which parts of the scripture that are narrative and why are they called narrative. Then I was also expecting that why narratives? Why is contemplative prayer hinged on narrative? So there must be a reason. And what are the reasons? So these are facts, truths, that will require to tell the people why emphasis on this aspect of scripture is required.
It's narrative. Another word for narrative is story. Telling a story. You tell a story, we hear stories, and you know, when you tell stories, you are able to sell the message easily. Why narrative? Because it helps you to journey. You are able to follow their events. I mentioned earlier that narrative has, you have events, and these events graduate from beginning, just keep going. It has a beginning, it graduates to a point, the middle, and graduates from the middle, eventually carriages to the end. You are able to follow, it helps you because you are using your sense of your senses, and because it's a story form, you are able to follow the events. If, for example, you were using scriptures like Ecclesiastes, book of Ecclesiastes, which are more like poetic books, you will not be able to apply your senses as such because they are not story-based. So basically, that's why we will use narrative scripture passages. Like I said, the scriptures the gospel are excellent narrative. And secondly, there are dialogues involved in narrative. Some of the prophetic books, you have dialogues in it. Because the dialogues involve characters. In the stories that we find in the gospel books, for example, in this one that I just talked about, the one on chapter 5 of Luke, the narrator is there, Peter was there, Peter spoke, Jesus spoke. Of course, even if Andrew and James didn't speak, their body language spoke. And these are things that you can easily, see in a story form. Characters are involved, events are involved. I don't know if I've answered your question, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions?
And came to give life to people. When you see that our brother was talking about how Jesus as a counter his disciples. It's like a way forward that people will have a collective mind of how to get inspired of when Jesus is. If you come to the church, that place he talked about come to cash men, to bring men. That's when the miracle started in the world, and other ways of doing God is we talk about the scriptures, talk about books, talk about a mind of the focus, the mind, the kind of narrative. We are talking about those things. How can we be able to feel sorry for ourselves that Jesus, the scripture can make things impossible in our life because we get talks, everyday stories, different kind of things to be important, and we want salvation, we want things to be possible. And when we encounter men, they despise us, they run from us. But how can we back up so that it can be addition to us?
I don't know. Maybe what I'm going to respond may not be appropriate, but I try to make sense out of what you're trying to ask. But maybe just a way of, just to give a response, just to give a response, if it will be helpful to you. Yes,